I am 78 years old, and it took me more than 50 years to understand something I could probably tell you in 10 minutes. I don't say that proudly. I say it because I don't have the luxury of pretending anymore. At my age, there's no reason to protect your own image. Most of the people who knew the younger version of me are gone, and the ones who are left don't ask many questions. I wake up earlier than I need to, not because I have somewhere to be, just because sleep lets go of me after a few hours. The house is quiet in a way it never used to be. The refrigerator hums. Pipes knock softly. Sometimes I sit at the kitchen table before the sun is up and try to remember what I thought my life was going to feel like at this stage. It doesn't feel the way I expected. When you're young, you think regret will come from the big mistakes, the obvious ones, the things you can point to and say, that was where I went wrong. I spent most of my life avoiding those. I stayed out of trouble. I paid my bills. I worked hard. I was, by most accounts, a responsible man. That wasn't the problem. The problem was quieter than that. In my 20s, I believed time was something that waited patiently. I thought it stretched out ahead of me like a long, straight road. There was no urgency. If something mattered, I could get to it later. If someone needed me, I would show up when things settled down. Things never settled down. I got married at 26. She was 24. We didn't have much money, but we had energy, and that felt like enough. I worked at a manufacturing plant then, long shifts, overtime when it was offered. I told myself I was building something solid, security, stability. I remember coming home with the smell of oil and metal still on my clothes. She would already be in the kitchen, trying new recipes from a paperback cookbook with a cracked spine. She'd ask about my day. I'd give her the short version. I was tired. There was always another shift in the morning. I don't remember asking enough about hers. When our first child was born, I held him in the hospital room and felt something close to fear. Not because I didn't love him, I did, but because I suddenly understood responsibility in a physical way. This small body depended on me for everything. I translated that into more hours at work. That's the first thing I wish I had known. Love is not proven by exhaustion. It isn't measured in overtime slips. At the time, though, it seemed reasonable. Diapers cost money. So did rent. So did doctor visits. My own father had worked himself thin, and I thought that was what good men did. You provided, you endured, you kept your head down. There were birthday parties I arrived late to because a machine broke down on the line. There were school plays where I sat in the back row, sleeping in after the lights dimmed. I told myself they were young, they wouldn't remember. They remembered more than I thought. In my 30s, promotions started coming. Not dramatic ones, just small steps up. Supervisor, then plant manager, more pay, more responsibility, a desk instead of a station on the floor. I started bringing work home, papers spread across the dining table after dinner. My son would try to tell me about a math test, and I'd nod without really hearing him. My daughter would tug at my sleeve, wanting me to see the drawing she made. I'd say, just a minute. I said, just a minute, for years. My wife stopped interrupting me after a while. She learned to read the set of my shoulders. If I looked tense, she kept conversation short. We told ourselves this was temporary, just until things stabilized, just until we got ahead. Ahead of what? I'm not sure now. Weekends became errands, lawn care, car maintenance, grocery runs. I remember sitting in the driveway once, engine off, hands still on the steering wheel, trying to gather the energy to go inside. I could hear laughter through the open living room window. I felt like a guest in my own house. But I told myself this was adulthood. This was what everyone did. In my 40s, the children became teenagers. They needed less help with homework and more space. I told myself that was natural. I didn't notice that they had stopped coming to me first. If they had a problem, they went to their mother or to their friends. I had positioned myself as the provider, not the confidant. There's a difference. I remember one evening when my son asked if I could come watch him play basketball. It was a Tuesday. I had a quarterly report due. I said I'd try. I didn't make it. He didn't ask again. It wasn't anger in his face afterward. That would have been easier to confront. It was something like adjustment, as if he had quietly recalculated where I fit in his life. That adjustment is what I feel now. My wife and I began talking less. Not fighting, just talking less. We operated like two competent co-workers running a small company. Bills paid, meals prepared, children transported where they needed to go. Sometimes I'd look at her across the table and realize I didn't know what she had been thinking about all day. There was a time when I knew her worries before she spoke them. That knowledge faded slowly, like paint losing color in the sun. We never had one explosive argument, no slammed doors, no dramatic declarations, just a steady drift. In my early 50s, the company restructured. I was offered a higher position in another city. Better pay, bigger house. I said yes before I really asked anyone how they felt. The children were nearly grown by then. My son was already talking about college out of state. My daughter had friends she didn't want to leave. My wife didn't say much at all. We moved anyway. I told myself this was the final push. A few strong years, then I'd slow down. Then I'd be present. Then I'd repair whatever had thinned out between us. But life doesn't pause while you prepare to pay attention. My son left for college and didn't come back except for holidays. My daughter followed a year later. The house, which I had worked so hard to afford, felt oversized and strangely hollow. My wife and I had dinner across from each other in near silence some nights. Not hostile silence, just unfamiliar. As if we were two people who had once shared a story, but no longer remembered the early chapters clearly. She took up gardening. I stayed late at the office. The moment of clarity didn't come like lightning. It arrived through a phone call. She had been feeling tired for months. I assume it was stress. We were both getting older. She finally went to the doctor alone. I was in a meeting when she called. Her voice was steady, too steady. She said the word cancer like it belonged to someone else. I remember staring at the conference room wall while she explained the treatment plan. I remember the pattern in the wallpaper more clearly than I remember her sentences. In the months that followed, I reduced my hours. I sat beside her during chemotherapy. I learned the schedule of medications. I drove her to appointments. I held her hand. And I kept thinking, I should have been here before. Not physically, emotionally. There were things I wanted to ask her. What she had needed from me in those busy decades. Whether she had felt alone in the same house where I thought I was sacrificing for all of us. But she was tired. Conversations felt heavy. So I kept most of those questions inside. She died on a Thursday morning in early spring. The garden was just beginning to show small signs of green. After the funeral, people told me I had been a devoted husband. They said I had taken such good care of her. I nodded and thanked them. They hadn't seen the years before the illness. That's when I began to understand what had taken me 50 years to see. Presence is not something you schedule for later. I had treated my life like a project plan. First, establish security, then enjoy it. First, finish the work, then sit down. First, solve the urgent problems, then attend to the quiet ones. The quiet ones were the important ones. After she was gone, I walked through the house touching objects she had chosen: curtains, picture frames, the small ceramic bowl by the sink where she dropped her rings at night. I tried to remember the last ordinary conversation we had before her diagnosis. I couldn't. That frightened me more than the hospital machines ever did. My children visit when they can. They have their own families now, jobs, responsibilities. They are kind to me, respectful. But there is a carefulness in our conversations. We discuss logistics, health updates, weather. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of what could have been. A joke almost shared, a story almost told. Then it passes. This is not a story about being abandoned. They call, they check in. On holidays, the house fills with noise again. Grandchildren run through the hallway. But when they leave, the silence returns quickly. I used to believe achievement would leave a louder echo, that the titles, the promotions, the years of diligence would amount to something tangible in old age. Instead, what lingers are the small moments I didn't step into. The basketball game I missed. The evenings I stayed in the study with paperwork. The just a minute that stretched into a decade. If I could condense 50 years into 10 minutes, this is what I would say. The assumption of unlimited time is a quiet thief. No one announces that the ordinary Tuesday you skip will matter later. No one warns you that your child will stop asking, that your spouse will adjust to carrying certain weights alone. It all looks reasonable what is happening. That's the danger. I don't blame the younger version of myself entirely. He was doing what he thought was right. He wanted to protect his family from hardship. He believed steadiness was love. But he confused being necessary with being connected. Now, at 78, I measure my days differently. Not because I have become wiser in some grand sense, mostly because there is less road left ahead. I can feel the narrowing. I sort through old photographs sometimes. There's one of my wife sitting on a blanket in the park, our children small beside her. I'm in the frame too, but I'm standing, half turned away, as if someone called my name from a distance. That's how I remember myself, half turned away. If you're listening to me, I won't tell you what to do. I've earned the right to speak about my own life, not to direct yours. I will only tell you what I didn't understand. I didn't understand that the people I loved were not waiting for a future version of me. They were living with the one that showed up each day. Tired, distracted, preoccupied. I didn't understand that consistency in small affection matters more than grand gestures during crises. I didn't understand that silence can grow roots if you let it. Time is not cruel, it is indifferent. It moves whether you are paying attention or not. And one day you look around and realize the paying attention part was the whole point. I sit at the kitchen table most mornings with a cup of coffee that goes cold before I finish it. I talk to my wife sometimes, not out loud, just in my thoughts. I tell her I see it now. I see what she was carrying quietly. I don't ask for forgiveness. That feels too dramatic. I simply acknowledge what was. There are still good things. A phone call from my daughter, a drawing mailed by a grandchild, the smell of rain through an open window. Gratitude and sorrow sit side by side now. They don't cancel each other out. If I had 10 minutes with my younger self, I wouldn't scold him. I would just place a hand on his shoulder and say, "Go sit in the living room. The paperwork can wait tonight." That's all. I know I won't be remembered as a terrible man. That's not my fear. My fear, if I have one, is that I will be remembered as distant. Reliable, but distant. There's a difference. At 78, the future is no longer a wide landscape. It's a small room. I can see the walls. I don't know how many years are left inside it. Maybe 5, maybe 10, if I'm fortunate. I don't need more time to build anything now. I only wish I had understood sooner that building was never the same as belonging. If you take anything from what I've said, let it be this simple observation from an old man who learned slowly. The people in your house are not background to your work. They are the work. I didn't know that. It took me more than 50 years to realize it. And by the time I did, most of the moments that would have proven it were already gone. So I sit here now, in the quiet before sunrise, and speak plainly because there's no advantage in pretending otherwise. This is what my life taught me. Not through catastrophe, not through scandal, just through ordinary days that I assumed would repeat forever. They didn't, and neither will these.